the eternal voice.
Subscribe if you dare to walk the thin line between curiosity and catastrophe, and leave a sign in the comments. Any mark will do, for tonight we trace the genealogy of madness itself. Here stands a promise wrapped in velvet and barbed wire. We shall examine the most dangerous books ever conceived, volumes that function not as mere repositories of information, but as living architectures of cosmic horror. Each page a doorway, each word a key that unlocks chambers in the mind never meant to be opened. The stakes arrive before the first page turns. Knowledge in these shadowed archives extracts its price not in coin or comfort, but in the fundamental restructuring of consciousness itself. These are not books that inform, they perform. Not texts that describe horror, they enact it through the simple, seemingly innocent act of reading. Tonight, we enter a library where every volume breathes with alien purpose, where marginalia whispers in languages that predate human speech, and where the very act of cataloging forbidden knowledge becomes a form of scholarly summoning. Consider this: what transforms ink on parchment into an instrument of cosmic terror? The answer lies not in supernatural curses or eldritch enchantments, but in something far more insidious: the capacity of certain ideas to act as cognitive viruses, reshaping the architecture of human understanding according to alien blueprints. These books serve as transmission vectors for concepts so fundamentally incompatible with human psychology that mere exposure begins a process of mental metamorphosis from which there is no return. The mechanism operates through ideological infection, just as biological viruses hijack cellular machinery to reproduce themselves. These textual contagions exploit the natural processes of human cognition, pattern recognition, meaning-making, the irresistible urge to understand, transforming them into vehicles for alien thought. The reader believes they are consuming information, but the information is consuming the reader, rewriting neural pathways according to principles that serve purposes no human mind was designed to comprehend. This transformation begins subtly, almost imperceptibly, a shift in perspective here, a new way of categorizing experience there. The comfortable boundaries between self and world, human and inhuman, meaningful and meaningless, begin to blur at their edges. What once seemed solid reveals itself as permeable. What once provided comfort becomes a source of unease. The very foundations of identity start to shift, like sand beneath structures never built to withstand such fundamental alterations. The mythos grimoires we shall examine, the Necronomicon with its genealogies of cosmic indifference, the King in Yellow with its aesthetic contagion, De Vermis Mysterious with its biological transformations, the Narcotic manuscripts with their deep time perspectives. Each represents a different methodology for the same ultimate purpose: our systematic dissolution of anthropocentric illusions and their replacement with perspectives that operate according to non-human principles of existence. Yet, even as we maintain scholarly distance, employing the protective rituals of academic analysis, we must acknowledge a disturbing truth. The very act of examining these texts participates in their propagation. Each description becomes a form of inoculation, preparing consciousness for concepts that might otherwise prove immediately devastating. You are no longer merely an observer of cosmic horror. By choosing to listen, to learn, to understand, you have become a participant in its transmission across the networks of human knowledge. This participation operates below the threshold of conscious recognition. The mind that believes itself safely analyzing dangerous ideas from scholarly remove has already begun the process of integration that will eventually reshape its fundamental assumptions about reality. The protective distance of academic inquiry proves illusory when the subject matter consists of ideas specifically designed to penetrate and transform consciousness, regardless of the intellectual frameworks used to approach them. The fog rolls in from harbors that exist in no earthly geography. The taste of copper pennies and ozone lingers on the tongue. Somewhere, a clock ticks with the rhythm of a sleeping god's heartbeat. These sensory anchors ground us as we prepare to navigate territories where the familiar becomes alien, where the comforting certainties of human-centered reality reveal themselves as gossamer veils stretched over abyssal depths. We begin with origins and definitions, tracing how certain texts achieve their dangerous potency. Then lineage, the careful genealogies of corruption as these books reproduce themselves across cultures and centuries using human minds as their vectors. Next, the mechanisms by which they operate, the precise cognitive technologies they employ to reshape consciousness. Following this, we examine specific cases, the particular grimoires that have achieved legendary status in the pantheon of forbidden knowledge. Finally, synthesis, how these fictional horrors speak to very real anxieties about knowledge, consciousness, and humanity's place in an indifferent cosmos. The stage is set, though you may not yet realize you stand upon it rather than observing from the audience. The curtain rises on a performance that began long before your arrival and will continue long after your departure. The only question remaining is not whether you will be changed by what you learn tonight, but how profoundly the alteration will penetrate the foundations of everything you thought you knew about the nature of reality itself. The books await. The knowledge beckons. The price, as always, will be paid in the currency of certainty, comfort, and the blessed ignorance that makes human existence psychologically sustainable. Welcome to the archive of the impossible, where every volume opened opens something within the reader in return. Before any other tome carved its sigil into the collective unconscious of forbidden lore, there existed the Necronomicon, not merely the most famous of dangerous books, but the archetype that established the template for all textual horrors that followed. Yet to understand its true menace, we must look beyond its reputation as a simple catalogue of monsters and examine how it functions as a comprehensive philosophical system designed to reorganize human consciousness according to principles of cosmic indifference. The book's legendary genesis in the ravings of Abdul al-Hazred, the mad Arab of Damascus, serves a purpose beyond mere literary genealogy. Al-Hazred represents the prototype of the scholar victim, one who sought ultimate knowledge and found instead ultimate alienation from human existence. His wanderings in the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, position him as a receiver of transmissions from realms where human categories of meaning simply do not apply. The original title, Al-Azif, the sound of nocturnal insects attributed to jinn, suggests not human language, but the ambient noise of an alien cosmos attempting to communicate through inadequate human vocal apparatus. This linguistic origin reveals the text's fundamental nature as translation of the untranslatable, where Al-Hazred's madness becomes not obstacle to understanding but prerequisite for it. The text's subsequent translations mark crucial mutations in its transmission vector. Theodorus Philetus's Greek version, retitled Necronomicon, represents the book's entry into Western intellectual tradition, where it could exploit the frameworks of classical learning to spread its cognitive contagion. Olaus Wormius's Latin translation further legitimized the text within scholarly circles, while the rumored English version by John Dee positioned it to influence the emerging scientific worldview of the Renaissance. Each translation functions not as mere linguistic conversion, but as evolutionary adaptation, allowing the book's essential message to survive and propagate across different cultural contexts like a virus mutating to overcome immune responses while preserving its core genetic structure. The Necronomicon's true danger lies not in the specific rituals it describes, but in its systematic deconstruction of anthropocentric assumptions about reality. The text presents a cosmology where human existence represents not the pinnacle of creation, but an accidental byproduct of forces utterly indifferent to mortal concerns. The old ones it catalogues, Cthulhu, Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, are not characters in a conventional sense, but rather personifications of cosmic principles, entropy, infinity, chaos, the fundamental indifference of physical law to human welfare. They exist as conceptual frameworks that reshape how consciousness processes reality itself. This reframing transforms the act of reading from passive information consumption into active participation in consciousness restructuring. The book operates through what we might term revelatory accumulation. Each chapter adds another layer of incomprehensible truth that gradually overwhelms the reader's capacity for cognitive integration. The text teaches not through logical argument, but through exposure conditioning consciousness to perceive reality as the old ones perceive it, vast, cold, and utterly without human meaning. Like systematic desensitization in reverse, each revelation prepares consciousness for the next, more devastating insight, building tolerance for cognitive dissonance while systematically undermining the psychological foundations that make human existence bearable. The legendary madness that afflicts the Necronomicon's readers stems from this systematic cognitive overload. Sanity, in this context, represents not mental health, but rather the maintenance of human-scaled perspectives on existence. The book's revelations about cosmic time scales, alien geometries, and the true nature of consciousness as temporary arrangement of matter prove literally unthinkable within frameworks evolved for terrestrial survival. Madness becomes not pathology, but accurate perception of humanity's actual position within cosmic hierarchies. The mind breaks not because it encounters falsehood, but because it encounters truth too large for human neural architecture to accommodate without fundamental restructuring. The book's modern persistence through academic study and popular culture demonstrates its successful adaptation to contemporary transmission vectors. Scholarly analysis of the Necronomicon serves to normalize and legitimize engagement with its contents, creating pathways for its influence to penetrate rational, skeptical minds that might otherwise resist direct mystical approaches. The text reproduces itself not through physical copying, but through the transformation of consciousness. Each mind that encounters its central insights becomes a potential vector for their further propagation. Academic distance proves illusory when the subject matter consists of ideas specifically designed to penetrate and transform consciousness, regardless of the intellectual frameworks used to approach them. Consider the weight of ancient vellum between trembling fingers, the metallic taste that accompanies the reading of certain passages, the way shadows seem to deepen around the margins of the page. These sensory anchors ground the text's abstract horrors in immediate physical experience, making its cosmic revelations feel tangible and present rather than safely theoretical. The fog rolls in from harbors that exist in no earthly geography. Somewhere in the building, a pipe knocks 3 times, and somewhere in your chest, something answers with the rhythm of recognition. The Necronomicon establishes the fundamental paradox that defines all dangerous knowledge. It promises ultimate understanding while delivering ultimate alienation. The price of cosmic perspective is the loss of human meaning, the dissolution of the comforting illusions that make mortal existence psychologically tolerable. Yet the book's continued attraction demonstrates humanity's persistent desire for truth, regardless of its psychological cost. It serves as a siren song of ultimate reality, luring seekers into an abyss where the only reward is the cold certainty of their own cosmic irrelevance. As we prepare to examine other vectors of forbidden knowledge, the Necronomicon stands as the foundational example of how texts can function as active agents of consciousness transformation rather than passive repositories of information. It reveals the template that all subsequent dangerous books would follow: the gradual revelation of truths, too alien for human comprehension, the systematic deconstruction of anthropocentric assumptions, and the transformation of readers into unwitting carriers of cosmic horror. The book closes, but its work continues within the altered consciousness of those who have encountered its truths. The real Necronomicon is not any single physical volume, but the pattern of understanding it creates, the cognitive virus it plants, the slow dissolution of human-centered reality it initiates in every mind that dares to truly comprehend its implications. Where the Necronomicon reshapes consciousness through cosmic revelation, the King in Yellow operates through an entirely different vector of horror: the transformation of aesthetic experience into psychological contagion. This mysterious play, forever incomplete within the literature that references it, represents perhaps the most insidious form of dangerous knowledge, information that spreads through beauty rather than truth, through artistic engagement rather than intellectual comprehension. It bypasses the rational defenses that might resist direct cosmic revelation, slipping past the mind's gatekeepers through the seductive pathways of art, emotion, and aesthetic appreciation. The play's power lies precisely in its incompleteness, its existence as a void within the text that readers must fill through imagination. Unlike other forbidden books that present themselves as complete repositories of alien knowledge, The King in Yellow functions most effectively as an absence, a gap that demands participation from its audience. This participatory requirement transforms the natural engagement that all drama demands into a form of ritualistic summoning, making every reader simultaneously audience and actor in a performance that extends far beyond any physical stage. The mind abhors a vacuum, and in rushing to fill the empty spaces left by Chambers' deliberate omissions, consciousness inadvertently completes patterns designed to reshape it according to alien geometries. The theatrical medium proves crucial to understanding the play's mechanism of action. Drama, by its very nature, requires the audience to imagine characters, visualize settings, and hear dialogue spoken within the theater of the mind. The King in Yellow exploits this cognitive requirement, using the brain's natural capacity for theatrical visualization as a delivery system for concepts that reshape consciousness according to alien principles. The play becomes a Trojan horse, smuggling cosmic horror past the mind's defenses by disguising it as entertainment. What begins as innocent aesthetic appreciation gradually transforms into active reconstruction of reality according to the play's twisted logic. The legendary yellow sign that appears throughout the text serves not merely as a symbol within the play's fictional world, but as an active sigil that imprints itself upon the reader's consciousness. Once perceived, the sign creates a permanent alteration in perception, a cognitive mark that persists long after the book has been closed. This marking process transforms readers from passive consumers of art into active participants in the play's ongoing performance, spreading its influence through their altered behavior and changed relationship to reality. The sign functions as both brand and key, marking those who have been touched by the play's influence while unlocking chambers in the mind that can never truly be sealed again. Consider the rustle of yellowed pages in a dimly lit theater, the scent of grease paint mixing with something indefinably wrong, The way stage lights seem to cast shadows that move independently of their sources. These sensory anchors ground the play's abstract horror in immediate physical experience, making its aesthetic contagion feel tangible rather than safely theoretical. This mechanism operates through what we might term aesthetic possession. The play's language, imagery, and dramatic structure function as components of a larger system designed to reorganize human consciousness. The famous second act, which supposedly drives all who read it to madness, represents the culmination of this process, the point at which aesthetic appreciation becomes cognitive restructuring, where entertainment transforms into indoctrination. The boundary between observer and participant dissolves as readers realize they are no longer consuming the play, but being consumed by it. The play's transmission through human culture follows patterns distinct from other dangerous books. Rather than spreading through scholarly networks or occult societies, it propagates through artistic and theatrical communities. Each performance, each reading, each discussion of its contents creates new vectors for contamination. The play reproduces itself not through direct copying, but through the creation of derivative works, poems inspired by its imagery, paintings that capture its atmosphere, musical compositions that echo its themes. Artists become unwitting carriers, spreading fragments of the play's influence through their own creative expressions. This artistic propagation reflects the play's deeper nature as a cultural virus. Unlike biological viruses that reproduce within individual organisms, The King in Yellow reproduces within cultural systems, using human creativity as its mechanism of replication. Each artist who encounters the play becomes a potential carrier, unconsciously incorporating its themes and imagery into their own work, thereby creating new pathways for its influence to spread through society like bright spores on velvet. The fragmentary presentation of the play in Chambers' original stories serves to model this process of cultural transmission. We never encounter the complete text because the complete text exists not as a single document, but as a distributed phenomenon spread across multiple minds, multiple works, multiple cultural expressions. Each fragment we encounter represents a piece of a larger pattern that can only be fully apprehended through collective engagement across numerous individuals and works. The play exists in the spaces between texts, in the connections readers make, in the cultural conversations that surround it. The play's modern resonance stems from its anticipation of contemporary concerns about media manipulation and viral content. In an age of social media and instant global communication, the idea of information that spreads through aesthetic appeal rather than rational argument has acquired new relevance. The King in Yellow prefigures modern anxieties about mimetic transmission, about the capacity of artistic works to shape consciousness on a mass scale without the subject's awareness or consent. Every viral video, every addictive social media platform, every piece of content designed to capture and hold attention operates according to principles first articulated in this fictional play. You scroll, and the scroll scrolls you. Algorithms lift the curtain, and the curtain never falls. The taste of dust and old velvet lingers in the mouth. Somewhere in the distance, a curtain falls with the weight of finality, yet the performance never truly ends. The whispers of Carcosa echo in the spaces between thoughts, and the yellow sign burns itself into the retina of memory. As we examine this theatrical pathway to madness, we must acknowledge our own participation in its transmission. Each discussion of The King in Yellow, each analysis of its themes, each attempt to understand its mechanisms of action contributes to its continued propagation through human culture. We are not merely studying a dangerous text. We are participating in its ongoing performance, serving as both audience and actors in a drama that extends far beyond the boundaries of any single book or story. Our very words become new lines in its endless script, spoken into the digital ether, ensuring its reach extends ever further. The curtain falls, but the performance continues. The play ends, but the playing never stops. Welcome to the theater of the mind, where every thought becomes a line in an endless script written by alien hands for human voices, and you have already found your place upon its stage. In the shadow cast by cosmic revelation and aesthetic contagion stands De Vermis Mysterious, Mysteries of the Worm, a grimoire that approaches forbidden knowledge through the lens of biological transformation and the systematic perversion of natural processes. This text, attributed to the Belgian sorcerer Ludwig Prynne, represents a fundamentally different approach to dangerous knowledge. Where other forbidden books focus on cosmic entities or psychological manipulation, this tome concerns itself with the malleability of flesh and the transformation of human beings into something fundamentally other than human. It whispers that the boundaries we perceive between species, between self and other, between human and inhuman, are nothing more than arbitrary limitations imposed by consciousness, too timid to embrace its true potential. The book's central thesis revolves around what Prynne termed organic mutability, the principle that all biological forms exist in a state of constant potential transformation, held in their current configurations only by the limitations of human imagination and will. Prynne's great discovery was learning to perceive these limitations as arbitrary constraints rather than natural laws, thereby gaining the ability to reshape living matter according to desires that transcend the boundaries of species, genus, and even kingdom. The flesh, he argued, remembers every form it has ever taken across evolutionary time, and with proper technique, those ancient patterns can be reawakened and reshaped according to conscious intention. This biological focus gives De Vermis Mysterious a visceral immediacy that other forbidden texts often lack. While readers might intellectually engage with cosmic indifference or aesthetic manipulation, the prospect of physical transformation strikes at more primitive levels of human psychology. The book's descriptions of metamorphosis trigger deep evolutionary anxieties about bodily integrity and species identity that rational thought cannot easily dismiss or contain. Every page seems to pulse with organic possibility. Every diagram suggests new configurations of bone and sinew that the mind rejects even as the body recognizes their terrible feasibility. The text's structure mirrors its thematic concerns with transformation and corruption. Rather than presenting information in linear progression, De Vermis Mysterious organizes its contents according to organic logic, patterns of development that mirror biological growth rather than intellectual argument. Chapters spawn subsections like cells dividing, ideas reproduce and mutate as they spread throughout the text, and concepts that appear simple in early passages reveal themselves to be complex, interconnected systems that pervade the entire work. This organization serves a purpose beyond stylistic innovation. By presenting information according to biological rather than rational principles, the book conditions readers to think in biological terms, to perceive ideas as living entities that grow, reproduce, and evolve, rather than static concepts to be understood and filed away. The practical applications described focus on what Prynne called flesh crafting, the art of reshaping living matter according to will and imagination. Yet these techniques serve as vehicles for exploring deeper philosophical questions about the nature of identity, consciousness, and the relationship between mind and body. If physical form can be altered at will, what constitutes the essential self? If consciousness can be transferred between bodies, or distributed across multiple forms? What happens to individual identity? These questions acquire particular urgency because the book provides detailed instructions for achieving such transformations. Unlike other forbidden texts that function primarily as philosophical treatises, De Vermis Mysteries operates as a practical manual, offering step-by-step procedures for readers who dare to attempt its teachings. The danger lies not simply in potential physical harm, though that danger certainly exists, but in the book's capacity to fundamentally alter the reader's relationship to their own embodied existence. Each successful application demonstrates the arbitrary nature of physical form, the malleability of biological systems, and the possibility of transcending human limitations through conscious manipulation of flesh and bone. This transcendence comes at a cost extending far beyond physical modifications. To successfully practice the arts described requires abandoning human ethical frameworks that treat the body as sacred, individual identity as inviolable, and species boundaries as meaningful. Advanced practitioners inevitably develop what Prynne termed organic indifference, a perspective that views all living beings as raw material for transformation rather than entities deserving moral consideration. The transmission of De Vermis Mysteries follows patterns mirroring its biological themes. Rather than spreading through direct copying or scholarly discussion, the book reproduces through practical demonstration. Each successful application creates visible evidence of its validity, inspiring others to seek out the text and attempt their own transformations. The book spreads like biological contagion, using successful practitioners as vectors for continued propagation. Consider the sensation of skin rippling like water, the sound of bones reshaping themselves with wet, organic pops, the smell of transformation, ozone mixed with copper, and something indefinably biological. These sensory anchors make the book's abstract concepts feel immediate and achievable, rather than safely theoretical. The book's modern relevance stems from its anticipation of contemporary developments in genetic engineering, body modification, and biotechnology. As humanity gains increasing power to reshape biological systems, the ethical and philosophical questions raised by De Vermis Mysteries become less fantastical and more urgently practical. The book serves as a dark mirror for human ambitions to transcend biological limitations, revealing potential costs of treating flesh as infinitely malleable raw material. The worm of transformation has already begun its work, burrowing through the foundations of what we consider immutably human, preparing the ground for transformations we cannot yet imagine but may no longer be able to prevent. Deep within the chronology of cosmic horror lie texts that predate human civilization itself. The Pnakotic manuscripts, fragments of knowledge preserved from epochs when other minds walked the earth and recorded their encounters with forces that dwarf human comprehension. These ancient tablets represent not merely another category of dangerous book, but rather the source code of cosmic horror itself, the original transmission of alien knowledge into terrestrial consciousness. They stand as monuments to the terrible truth that humanity was neither the first intelligence to inhabit this world, nor the first to discover that consciousness itself might be a cosmic mistake. The Pnakotic manuscripts occupy a unique position within the hierarchy of forbidden texts because they function as genuine historical documents, records of actual encounters between early intelligences and cosmic entities that existed long before the rise of human civilization. Unlike later works that approach cosmic horror through philosophical speculation or artistic interpretation, these tablets preserve direct testimony from witnesses who observed firsthand the consequences of consciousness, confronting the truly alien. They speak with the authority of experience rather than imagination, carrying the weight of civilizations that achieved understanding at the cost of their continued existence. The manuscript's fragmentary nature serves multiple functions within their mechanism of horror. On the practical level, incomplete preservation mirrors the actual process of archaeological discovery, lending authenticity to their fictional existence. Yet this fragmentation also creates gaps that readers must fill through imagination and inference, drawing them into active participation with the text's revelatory process. Each missing passage becomes a void demanding completion, each damaged section an invitation to speculation that gradually draws the reader deeper into the manuscript's alien worldview. The mind abhors incompleteness and rushes to fill the voids, inadvertently completing patterns that were deliberately left unfinished. The temporal displacement that defines the Pennacotic manuscripts creates a unique form of cognitive dissonance, enhancing their psychological impact. Readers must simultaneously accept these texts as ancient beyond measure while recognizing that their contents describe events and entities remaining actively present in the contemporary world. This temporal paradox suggests that linear time itself might be illusion, that past and present exist simultaneously within cosmic frameworks that dwarf human comprehension. The manuscripts force consciousness to grapple with the possibility that history is not sequence but superposition, not progression but eternal recurrence. The manuscript's descriptions of pre-human civilizations reveal societies that achieved technological and philosophical sophistication far exceeding recorded human history, yet ultimately succumbed to cosmic forces that rendered all achievements meaningless. The Yithians with their temporal manipulations, the Vormis with their crude but effective worship, the unnamed builders of vast libraries, each represents a different approach to the same fundamental problem of consciousness, existing within a cosmos utterly hostile to awareness itself. This narrative pattern establishes a template for understanding human civilization as merely another temporary arrangement of matter and energy, destined for dissolution when cosmic cycles complete their predetermined patterns. The specific entities and phenomena described Tsathoggua in his subterranean realm, the great race of Yith and their temporal manipulations, represent early attempts to catalog and comprehend cosmic horror before human language developed adequate vocabulary for such concepts. The primitive terminology captures the raw immediacy of first contact with the incomprehensible, often proving more evocative than later, more sophisticated treatments. These ancient scribes possessed no philosophical frameworks to cushion the impact of cosmic revelation, no cultural traditions to provide comforting interpretations. This linguistic primitiveness serves a deeper function within the manuscript's mechanism of horror. By presenting cosmic concepts through archaic terminology and incomplete grammar, the texts force readers to engage in translation processes that mirror the original struggle to comprehend alien realities. Readers must work to understand not just what the manuscripts describe, but how to think about concepts that resist integration into modern cognitive frameworks. The act of translation becomes a form of initiation, gradually reshaping consciousness to accommodate perspectives no human mind was designed to contain. The manuscript's influence on later forbidden texts demonstrates their function as a foundational source, generating derivative works across millennia. The Necronomicon references pre-human lore. The King in Yellow echoes themes first articulated in Pnakotic fragments, and countless other dangerous books draw upon concepts originating in these primordial tablets. This generative capacity suggests the manuscripts function not merely as historical documents, but as active sources of ongoing revelation, seeds planted in the deep past that continue sprouting new forms of forbidden knowledge. The scholarly apparatus surrounding the Pnakotic manuscripts, archaeological expeditions discovering new fragments, linguistic analyses attempting to decode contents, historical reconstructions placing them within broader patterns, serves to normalize and legitimize engagement with dangerous contents. By framing these texts as objects of scientific rather than mystical interest, scholars create pathways for influence to penetrate rational minds that might otherwise resist direct confrontation with cosmic horror. Consider the weight of stone tablets worn smooth by ages, the faint traces of symbols carved by minds operating according to non-human logic, the way certain passages seem to shift meaning when viewed peripherally. These sensory anchors ground the manuscript's temporal alienation in immediate physical experience, making their deep-time perspectives feel tangible rather than theoretical. The manuscript's ultimate revelation concerns the cyclical nature of cosmic history, the idea that civilizations rise and fall according to patterns repeating across geological timescales, with each cycle bringing consciousness into renewed contact with the same cosmic forces that destroyed predecessors. This cyclical framework transforms human history from narrative of progress into endless repetition of the same fundamental encounter between terrestrial awareness and cosmic indifference. As we examine these primordial fragments, we must recognize that we are not merely studying ancient history, but participating in the latest iteration of a cycle that began in Earth's youth and continues through our own engagement with forbidden knowledge. The stone speaks across aeons, and its voice grows stronger with each mind that learns to listen. Among the lesser-known but equally dangerous texts stands the Culte des Ghouls, a French grimoire that explores perhaps the most viscerally disturbing aspect of cosmic horror, the systematic corruption of death itself and the transformation of mortality from natural transition into supernatural predation. This text reveals how cosmic horror manifests through the perversion of humanity's most fundamental biological processes, reframing death not as ending but as feeding. Where other forbidden books assault consciousness with cosmic indifference or aesthetic possession, this grimoire strikes at something more primal, the instinctive understanding that death represents conclusion rather than consumption, rest rather than harvest. The Culte des Ghouls occupies a unique position within the pantheon of forbidden books because it focuses specifically on necromantic practices and the cultivation of relationships with entities that feed upon death and decay. While other dangerous texts explore cosmic indifference or alien consciousness, this grimoire concerns itself with forces actively malevolent toward human existence, entities that view living beings not as irrelevant specks, but as potential sustenance for eternal hunger. These beings possess agency, intention, and most disturbingly, appetite, specifically directed toward human life force in ways that transform every mortal into potential prey in a cosmic hunting ground where the predators have been patient beyond measure. The text's central revelation involves the discovery that death represents not natural biological process, but cosmic predation orchestrated across geological timescales. The entities described, ghouls, vampires, and other necrophagous beings, are revealed not as supernatural anomalies but as representatives of fundamental cosmic forces that feed upon life energy released during transitions from existence to non-existence. Death becomes not ending but feeding, not natural conclusion but active cosmic consumption, where every funeral becomes a feast, every cemetery a feeding ground, and every moment of mortal suffering a course in an endless banquet served to entities whose hunger spans epochs. This reframing of mortality transforms every human death into sacrifice, whether conscious or unconscious, to entities whose existence depends upon regular harvest of life force from mortal beings. The text suggests human civilization itself has been unconsciously structured to maximize this harvest, with wars, diseases, and natural disasters serving as efficient mechanisms for delivering sustenance to cosmic predators hidden from ordinary awareness. Hospitals become processing facilities, battlefields become dining halls, and the entire apparatus of human society reveals itself as an elaborate system of livestock management designed to ensure steady supply for beings that exist beyond human perception, yet influence human development with the patience of farmers tending generational crops. The practical instructions focus on establishing communication and eventually communion with these death-feeding entities, yet the text makes clear that such contact inevitably transforms the practitioner, gradually shifting perspective from potential prey to conscious collaborator in cosmic predation. This transformation involves not merely intellectual acceptance of humanity's role as food, but active participation in harvesting life force from other human beings. The practitioner learns to smell the approach of death weeks before its arrival, to taste the spiritual essence released during final moments, to cultivate relationships with dying individuals, not from compassion but from an acquired hunger that grows with each successful feeding. The book's structure mirrors this gradual transformation from victim to predator through a pedagogical approach that proves particularly insidious because it exploits natural human fascination with death and mortality. Early chapters present seemingly academic discussions of folklore and mythology, analyzing cultural traditions surrounding death and associated entities with the thoroughness of legitimate scholarship. Only gradually does the text reveal that folklore traditions preserve accurate information about actual cosmic predators and that academic study represents the first step toward establishing contact with the entities themselves. The transition from scholarly interest to practical involvement occurs so gradually that practitioners often fail to recognize when they have crossed the line from studying predation to participating in it. Every culture develops elaborate traditions surrounding death, funeral rites, afterlife beliefs, stories about ghosts and revenants, and the culte des ghouls positions itself as scholarly examination of these universal concerns. Readers approach seeking understanding of mortality and find themselves gradually drawn into direct engagement with entities embodying death's most predatory aspects. The scholarly mask slowly dissolves, revealing not academic enlightenment but recruitment into a cosmic system of harvest and consumption that has operated since consciousness first emerged on Earth. The transmission follows patterns mirroring thematic concerns with predation and consumption, spreading not through intellectual curiosity or aesthetic appreciation, but through creation of practical dependencies. Each successful application of necromantic techniques creates needs that can only be satisfied through continued engagement with the text and entities it describes. Practitioners become psychologically and spiritually dependent upon relationships with cosmic predators, unable to return to purely human existence as their very being becomes intertwined with the cycles of consumption they facilitate. This dependency model makes the culte des ghouls particularly difficult to abandon once encountered. Unlike books that can be read and set aside, this text creates ongoing obligations and relationships, persisting long after the physical book has been closed. Contacted entities continue making demands upon practitioners, gradually transforming them into active agents of cosmic predation within human society, living extensions of the book's ongoing gruesome narrative. Consider the scent of earth after rain mixed with something sweet and cloying that catches in the throat. the sound of soil shifting in places where no wind blows but something moves beneath, the way shadows seem to pool around graveyards, even on sunny days, as though gravity loves them more than light. These sensory anchors ground the text's necromantic focus in immediate physical experience, making its predatory cosmology feel tangible rather than theoretical. The taste of copper pennies appears without explanation, and somewhere in the distance, church bells toll with rhythms that match no earthly timepiece. The book's modern relevance stems from exploration of themes resonating with contemporary anxieties about mortality, healthcare, and commercialization of death. In an age when death has become increasingly medicalized and commodified, the idea of mortality as cosmic predation acquires new layers of meaning. The text serves as dark commentary on societies that profit from death and suffering, revealing potential spiritual costs of treating mortality as business opportunity rather than sacred transition. Our hospitals with their billing codes and memorial packages, our funeral industry with its curated grief experiences, our entire apparatus of managed dying all might represent unconscious optimization for harvest efficiency rather than human dignity. The philosophical implications extend beyond specific focus on death and necromancy to encompass broader questions about existence itself. If life serves primarily as sustenance for cosmic predators, what meaning can individual human existence possess? If consciousness represents cosmic farming designed to cultivate life force for eventual harvest, how can humans maintain any sense of purpose or dignity in the face of such ultimate exploitation? These questions acquire particular urgency because the text provides no easy answers or comforting alternatives. Unlike other dangerous books that offer transcendence or cosmic perspective as compensation for lost innocence, the Culte des Ghouls presents only the choice between remaining ignorant prey or becoming conscious predator. There is no escape from the cosmic food chain, only the possibility of changing one's position within it. And that change comes at the cost of everything that once made existence recognizably human. The devourers of the dead are already among us and perhaps within us, waiting for the moment when we too must choose between ignorance and complicity in the cosmic predation that defines existence itself. In the frozen archives of pre-human knowledge stands the Book of Eibon, a text that approaches cosmic horror through the manipulation of time itself, the fundamental framework within which human consciousness operates, and without which human existence becomes literally incomprehensible. This ancient tome, attributed to the Hyperborean wizard Eibon, reveals how the most profound forms of forbidden knowledge concern not space or matter but temporality, the dimension that structures all experience and whose dissolution represents the ultimate form of existential horror. Where other dangerous books assault consciousness through alien revelation or biological transformation, Eibon's work strikes at the very foundation of awareness itself, the temporal sequence that allows consciousness to perceive itself as continuous entity moving through sequential moments. The Book of Eibon represents a fundamentally different approach to dangerous knowledge than its contemporaries. Where other forbidden texts focus on cosmic entities or biological transformation, Eibon's work concerns itself with the nature of time as a dimension that can be navigated, manipulated, and ultimately transcended through application of proper techniques and sufficient will. The text's central thesis revolves around what Eibon termed the illusion of temporal sequence, the idea that past, present, and future exist simultaneously within higher dimensional frameworks that human consciousness normally cannot perceive. Linear time, he insists, is not the river we imagine, but a single jewel, viewed from a moving angle called mind, its facets shimmering with all moments at once. This revelation proves more devastating than encounters with alien entities because it undermines the basic structure of experience itself. Linear time, according to Ibon's teachings, represents not an objective feature of reality, but rather a cognitive limitation imposed by the structure of human awareness, a prosthesis consciousness built to steady itself, a crutch that became a creed. Transcendence of this limitation opens pathways to forms of existence that operate according to entirely different principles of causality and sequence, where causes arrive from after their effects, and decisions lay their roots into earlier dirt. The practical techniques described focus primarily on what Ibon called chronesthetic practices, methods for developing sensitivity to temporal currents and learning to navigate between different temporal states. These practices begin with simple meditation exercises designed to heighten awareness of time's passage, breath counting against metrical shadows, listening for the grain in silence, letting attention rest on the interval between seconds until the interval goes transparent. From there, exercises of dual remembrance arise. Practitioners learn to recall a childhood morning while simultaneously noticing a conversation that will not occur until next winter, holding both without choosing. Advanced techniques allow practitioners to perceive multiple temporal states simultaneously, to remember events that have not yet occurred, and eventually to exist partially outside linear time altogether. The danger of these practices lies not merely in potential temporal displacement, but in their capacity to fundamentally undermine the cognitive structures that make human consciousness possible. Individual identity depends upon continuity of memory across linear time. Rational thought requires the assumption that causes precede effects. Social interaction presupposes shared temporal frameworks, allowing meaningful communication and cooperation. Each successful application of Ibon's chronesthetic techniques erodes these fundamental assumptions, gradually transforming practitioners into beings whose consciousness operates according to non-human principles of temporal existence. The mind acclimates with a shiver and then a slide, until the continuity once called me becomes more eddy than river, more pooling than flow. Advanced practitioners often develop what contemporary observers might mistake for madness, but which actually represents consciousness that has transcended linear temporal limitations, while retaining enough connection to human awareness to attempt communication across temporal boundaries. Some speak lucidly of withholding a birthday until it could be better afforded, of borrowing an afternoon from the week after surgery to survive the day before it. Others report the dread of simultaneity, the certainty that while they pour tea, they also finish a letter and have already grieved its consequences. They describe events as though past and future were spatial rather than temporal categories, demonstrate knowledge that can only be explained through access to information existing outside normal causality. The transmission of the Book of Ibon follows patterns mirroring its temporal themes, appearing to propagate through what Ibon termed temporal resonance, the tendency for individuals with natural sensitivity to temporal anomalies to discover the text across different historical periods, often under circumstances suggesting the book's appearance was predetermined by future events rather than caused by past ones. Copies do not merely circulate, they recur, appearing in historical contexts where they should not exist, influencing events that precede their apparent composition. A codex appears in a Hyperborean vault and again in a Renaissance study that references future marginalia. Ownership looks like echo rather than acquisition. This non-linear transmission creates a unique form of textual existence in which the Book of Ibon seems to exist partially outside normal causality, functioning not merely as repository of temporal techniques, but as active demonstration of those techniques' efficacy. The book operates as a temporal paradox made manifest, existing simultaneously across all time periods, while maintaining coherent identity that transcends linear sequence. Consider the sensation of moments stretching like taffy under warm lamps, the way certain rooms seem to exist in multiple time periods simultaneously, the sound of footsteps echoing from times that have not yet come to pass. A stairwell smells faintly of winter you have not yet lived. In certain rooms, the light arrives as if refracted through other years. Dust not yet disturbed, dust long settled. These sensory anchors ground the book's temporal manipulations in immediate physical experience, making its chronesthetic revelations feel tangible rather than theoretical. The book's influence on other dangerous texts demonstrates its function as a temporal nexus, connecting different periods of forbidden knowledge. References to Eibon's teachings appear in texts that predate his supposed lifetime, while his influence can be traced through manuscripts that demonstrate awareness of future developments in cosmic horror. This temporal interconnectedness suggests that all dangerous books exist within a non-linear network of influence that transcends ordinary historical causality, with influence ceasing to be arrow and becoming braid. The modern relevance of the Book of Eibon stems from its anticipation of contemporary developments in physics and cosmology that challenge conventional understanding of time and causality. Quantum mechanics suggests that observation affects past events. Relativity demonstrates that temporal sequence depends upon frame of reference, and theoretical physics proposes models of reality in which time might be emergent rather than fundamental. Eibon's ancient insights acquire new credibility as human science approaches similar conclusions through different methodologies, his voice not vindicated so much as rhymed by modern discoveries. The philosophical implications of Eibon's temporal teachings extend far beyond their specific focus on chronesthetic practices to encompass fundamental questions about consciousness, identity, and meaning. If linear time represents merely a cognitive limitation rather than objective feature of reality, what happens to concepts like personal growth, moral development, and historical progress that depend upon temporal sequence? If past and future exist simultaneously, what significance can individual choices and actions possess? Eibon answers with a sober paradox. Choice is the felt texture of the already chosen, responsibility deepening rather than dissolving because the weave is intricate, because the page writes and is written by the eye that reads it. The Book of Eibon offers no comforting answers to these questions, presenting instead the stark choice between remaining trapped within the illusion of linear time or embracing forms of existence that transcend human understanding, but may no longer deserve to be called human. The wizard Eibon himself serves as a cautionary example, achieving temporal transcendence at the cost of everything that once made him recognizably mortal, learning to dwell in the eddies where before and after meet, a priest of a threshold that does not divide but permeates. Time flows backward and forward simultaneously, pooling in eddies where past and future meet. Your hand hovers over a page that is already turned. The curtain of sequence trembles and you glimpse the stagehands casually rearranging causes and effects while the audience hums along to a cue that has not yet been played. The book remains open, its pages turning themselves according to rhythms that have nothing to do with human hands or human intentions, and somewhere, a future you has just begun while a past you has only now arrived. From the murky depths of British cosmic horror emerges the Revelations of Glocki, a text that explores perhaps the most insidious form of forbidden knowledge, information that spreads through biological contamination and transforms recipients into undead servants of alien intelligence. This grimoire, created through Ramsey Campbell's contributions to the mythos, represents a uniquely terrestrial approach to cosmic horror that grounds alien revelation in familiar English countryside, while revealing the potential for that familiar environment to harbor consciousness utterly inimical to human existence. Unlike the vast cosmic indifference of distant old ones, Glocky's horror lurks in village ponds where children once sailed paper boats, in marshy hollows where lovers once met, in quiet lakes that reflect not sky but something ancient watching from beneath. The Revelations of Glocky differs fundamentally from other forbidden texts in its method of creation and transmission. Rather than being written by human authors who encountered cosmic forces and struggled to translate their visions into inadequate language, this book is dictated directly by Glocky itself, an ancient entity dwelling in the stagnant waters of a lake in the Severn Valley. The text represents not human interpretation of alien knowledge, but direct communication from a cosmic intelligence that has learned to manipulate human language as a tool for expanding its influence and creating new servants for its eternal purposes. Each word carries the weight of alien intention, each sentence structured according to logics that serve purposes beyond human comprehension, yet expressed through syntax familiar enough to slip past conscious defenses like groundwater seeping through limestone. The entity Glocky embodies a form of cosmic horror that is simultaneously alien and terrestrial, ancient and immediate. Unlike the distant old ones of Lovecraft's cosmos, Glocky exists within the familiar geography of rural England, transforming peaceful countryside into a landscape of subtle menace where every pond, stream, and marshy hollow might harbor forms of consciousness that predate human civilization by millions of years. This geographical grounding makes Glocky's horror more immediate and psychologically accessible than more abstract cosmic threats. The entity does not descend from outer space, but rises from inner earth, not arriving but revealing itself to have been present all along, waiting beneath the surface of landscapes humans thought they knew and understood. The revelations contained within Glocky's text focus primarily on the nature of what the entity terms living death, a state of existence that transcends the traditional boundary between life and death, while preserving consciousness and memory across the transition. Those who serve Glocky exist in a condition that is neither fully alive nor completely dead, but rather represents a third state combining the worst aspects of both conditions, the consciousness of life coupled with the physical decay of death. They retain awareness while losing vitality, preserve memory while surrendering hope, continue thinking while abandoning the capacity for growth or change that makes consciousness worthwhile. This concept of living death serves multiple functions within the text's mechanism of horror. On the literal level, it describes the actual condition of Glocky's servants, who continue to think and act despite progressive decomposition of their physical forms. Yet on a deeper level, living death serves as metaphor for various forms of spiritual and psychological stagnation that can afflict human existence. The persistence of consciousness within circumstances that no longer support genuine vitality. The corporate executive who continues working decades past any sense of purpose. The academic who accumulates knowledge without wisdom. The citizen scrolling endlessly through information feeds, while their capacity for meaningful engagement withers. All represent forms of living death that Glocky's revelations make horrifyingly explicit. The transmission of Glocky's revelations follows patterns mirroring the entity's own method of creating servants, spreading not through intellectual appeal or aesthetic attraction, but through a form of biological contamination that occurs during the reading process itself. Exposure to Glocky's words creates subtle physiological changes in readers that gradually prepare them for eventual transformation into the entity's undead servants. The book functions as both information source and delivery mechanism for a form of cosmic infection that operates through the very act of comprehension, turning understanding into contamination and knowledge into contagion. This biological model of textual transmission makes the revelations of Glocky particularly insidious because it operates below the threshold of conscious awareness. Readers who encounter the text often experience no immediate negative effects and may even find its contents intellectually fascinating or aesthetically compelling. Only gradually do they begin to notice changes, a persistent chill that no amount of warmth can dispel, a growing indifference to pleasures that once brought joy, a creeping certainty that the living world has become somehow unreal, while only the stagnant depths feel authentic. Consider the smell of stagnant water, mixed with something sweet and organic that catches in the throat like forgotten perfume. The sound of bubbles rising from depths where no air should be trapped. The way moonlight on still water seems to reveal shapes, moving beneath the surface with purpose that predates human intention. These sensory anchors ground Glocky's aquatic horror in immediate physical experience, making its revelations about living death feel tangible rather than theoretical. The text's focus on stagnation and decay reflects deeper themes about the relationship between knowledge and vitality. Glocky's revelations suggest that certain forms of understanding are fundamentally incompatible with healthy human existence, not because they are too alien or complex for human minds to grasp, but because they represent perspectives that can only be fully appreciated by consciousness that has already begun to separate itself from the processes of life and growth that sustain normal human awareness. The modern relevance of the revelations of Glocky stems from its exploration of themes that resonate with contemporary concerns about environmental degradation and information overload. In an age of climate change and ecological collapse, the idea of stagnant waters that spread corruption acquires new meaning. Similarly, in an era when access to information has expanded exponentially while rates of depression and spiritual emptiness have similarly increased, Glocky's revelations about knowledge as spiritual death acquire uncomfortable relevance to contemporary human experience. The waters remain still, but beneath their surface something vast and patient continues its work, transforming the living into the undead, the vital into the stagnant, the human into something that serves purposes no mortal mind was meant to comprehend, and perhaps already has begun. As we approach the culmination of our exploration through the most dangerous books of the mythos, we must examine how these individual texts function not as isolated phenomena, but as components of a larger system of forbidden knowledge that spans cultures, centuries, and forms of consciousness. The modern world has become the ultimate vector for their transmission, transforming ancient whispers into global phenomena that operate at speeds and scales the original authors could never have imagined. What once required generations of careful cultivation through secret societies now propagates through fiber optic cables at light speed, reaching millions of minds simultaneously through the very technologies we believed would liberate us from superstition. The interconnected nature of these dangerous texts becomes apparent when we examine their shared themes, cross-references, and cumulative effect upon human culture and consciousness. The Necronomicon's cosmic revelations prepare minds for the king in Yellow's aesthetic contamination. De Vermis' mysterious biological transformations echo themes first articulated in the Pennacotic manuscripts. The temporal dissolution described in the Book of Ibon resonates with the living death explored in the revelations of Glocky. Each text serves as both destination and pathway, complete in itself, yet pointing toward deeper levels of forbidden understanding. Like facets of a multidimensional crystal, each reflects the same essential truth from different angles, revealing aspects of cosmic reality that can only be fully apprehended through engagement with the entire system rather than any individual component. This systematic interconnection suggests that the various dangerous books represent not independent discoveries of cosmic horror, but rather different expressions of a single, underlying pattern of revelation that manifests across multiple forms and contexts. The books teach each other, reference each other, and ultimately reveal themselves as chapters in a single vast tome whose complete text exists not in any physical form, but in the transformed consciousness of those who have encountered its distributed fragments. The digital age has fundamentally transformed how these textual contagions spread through human consciousness. Where once forbidden knowledge required physical books, secret societies, and generations of careful transmission, modern technology allows instantaneous global propagation of the most dangerous ideas. The internet functions as a vast nervous system for forbidden knowledge, connecting minds across continents and allowing dangerous concepts to achieve critical mass within hours rather than centuries. Every search engine becomes an oracle, every social media feed a grimoire, every recommendation algorithm a form of digital divination serving increasingly disturbing content to minds hungry for transgression. Consider the glow of screens in darkened rooms, casting blue light on faces that grow more hollow with each scroll, the endless stream of information flowing past tired eyes, the way search algorithms learn to serve increasingly disturbing content to minds hungry for the forbidden. These are the modern sensory anchors of textual contamination, the technological equivalents of candlelit libraries and whispered secrets. The dangerous books have evolved beyond physical form into pure information, spreading through networks that span the globe like neural pathways in a planetary brain that dreams increasingly alien dreams. Social media platforms serve as particularly effective vectors for mimetic transmission, exploiting the human tendency to share compelling content without fully understanding its implications. A fragment of the yellow sign shared as an image, a quote from the Necronomicon posted as text, a discussion thread analyzing Glocky's revelations. Each becomes a node in a vast network of contamination that operates below the threshold of conscious recognition. The ancient texts reproduce themselves through human creativity, spawning endless variations, interpretations, and derivative works that carry their essential patterns into new contexts and consciousness. The democratization of forbidden knowledge creates unprecedented opportunities for cosmic contamination on a global scale. Ideas that once required decades to spread across human culture can now achieve planetary distribution within moments. The traditional barriers that once contained dangerous knowledge within specialized communities, geographic isolation, linguistic barriers, cultural taboos, institutional gatekeeping, have been systematically dismantled by technologies that make all information equally accessible to anyone with sufficient curiosity and basic literacy. This acceleration has produced what we might term cosmic information overload, a condition in which human consciousness is simultaneously exposed to more forbidden knowledge than it can safely process and deprived of the traditional cultural supports that once helped individuals navigate such encounters. The result is a form of mass psychological destabilization, manifesting as increasing rates of anxiety, depression, nihilism, and existential despair across populations that have achieved high levels of technological development and information access. Yet this crisis also represents an unprecedented opportunity for collective transformation. If dangerous knowledge can spread more rapidly than ever before, so too can the wisdom necessary to navigate its implications constructively. The same technologies that accelerate cosmic contamination also enable new forms of mutual support, collective understanding, and collaborative meaning-making that might allow human consciousness to evolve beyond its current limitations. Modern adaptations of mythos themes in literature, film, games, and other media serve a dual function. On one hand, they allow engagement with terrifying concepts from a safe remove, providing controlled transgression that satisfies the human appetite for forbidden knowledge without incurring its direct costs. On the other hand, they subtly prime consciousness, making it more susceptible to deeper truths when encountered in their purest form. Every horror movie becomes a form of inoculation, every video game a training simulation, every piece of cosmic horror media a gateway for more potent forms of forbidden knowledge. The widespread cultural penetration demonstrates that the fear of forbidden knowledge is not merely a niche literary trope, but a fundamental human anxiety deeply embedded in our collective psyche. Every conspiracy theory, every urban legend, every piece of secret knowledge that circulates through digital networks carries traces of the same essential pattern first articulated in the mythos grimoires. The scholarly breadcrumbs scattered across academic discussions, fan communities, and analytical frameworks create pathways for dangerous ideas to infiltrate rational discourse. By framing cosmic horror as object of intellectual study rather than spiritual danger, these analytical approaches normalize engagement with concepts that might otherwise trigger immediate psychological defense mechanisms. As we prepare for our final revelation, we must acknowledge that we have not remained unchanged by our encounter with these dangerous texts. We have participated in the very process of cosmic contamination that we set out to analyze, serving as vectors for the continued propagation of forbidden knowledge through human consciousness. The transformation is already underway, the networks are already active, and the synthesis is already complete. The ancient whispers have become modern screams, and the screams have become the background hum of digital civilization itself. Throughout our journey through the most dangerous books of the mythos, a profound transformation has been occurring beneath the surface of conscious awareness, accumulating like silt in still water. Each text examined, each concept explored, each mechanism of horror analyzed has contributed to a cumulative alteration in perspective that extends far beyond mere intellectual understanding. We have not simply been studying cosmic horror, we have been participating in its propagation, serving as both audience and actors in a performance that transforms observers into participants through the very act of observation. You are not beside the stage observing safely from the audience. You are ankle-deep in the orchestral pit, and the overture is inside your head. This transformation begins with the recognition that the dangerous books we have examined are not safely contained within the boundaries of fiction. While they may have originated as literary creations, their influence has transcended fictional origins to become active forces within human culture and consciousness. The ideas they contain have achieved independent existence, reproducing themselves through academic discussion, artistic interpretation, and the altered awareness of those who encounter them in any form. They have become what we might term living concepts, patterns of understanding that exhibit the characteristics of life itself. Growth, reproduction, adaptation, and the drive to propagate across new territories of consciousness. The scholarly apparatus we have employed throughout this examination, careful analysis, systematic categorization, detailed exploration of themes and mechanisms, serves not merely to understand these dangerous texts, but to legitimize and normalize engagement with their contents. By framing cosmic horror as object of academic study rather than spiritual danger, we have created pathways for its influence to penetrate rational, skeptical minds that might otherwise resist direct mystical approaches to forbidden knowledge. This academic camouflage proves particularly effective because it exploits natural human curiosity about the nature of consciousness, reality, and meaning. The laboratory coat becomes ceremonial robe, the academic paper a form of incantation, and every taxonomy becomes a tunnel through which dangerous knowledge flows under the protective banner of intellectual inquiry. The gradual nature of this transformation mirrors the pedagogical methods employed by the dangerous books themselves. Rather than announcing their destructive potential immediately, these texts begin with seemingly manageable concepts and gradually introduce more alien perspectives as readers develop tolerance for cognitive dissonance. Our own examination has followed this same pattern, beginning with familiar literary analysis and progressively revealing more disturbing implications about the nature of knowledge, consciousness, and reality. Each chapter has served as both inoculation and infection, building resistance to psychological shock while simultaneously introducing the very concepts that will eventually overwhelm that resistance. This progressive structure creates what we might term scholarly addiction, a condition in which engagement with forbidden knowledge becomes self-reinforcing and increasingly difficult to abandon. Each new insight creates questions that can only be answered through deeper engagement with cosmic perspectives. Each answer reveals new layers of reality that demand further exploration. The pursuit of understanding becomes a pathway toward transformation that cannot be reversed through simple intellectual rejection or willful ignorance. The mind, once exposed to cosmic perspectives, finds human-scaled reality increasingly inadequate, like a room that has become too small after experiencing vast spaces. Consider the weight of realization settling like sediment in still water, the way certain concepts seem to echo in the spaces between thoughts, the sensation of standing at the edge of an abyss that has been there all along, hidden by the comfortable illusions of everyday existence. The air grows thin, carrying the scent of ozone and something ancient. Your own heartbeat seems to slow, aligning with a rhythm far older and more vast. A page turns somewhere behind you, though you are alone. These are the sensory anchors of consciousness, encountering its own cosmic dimensions, the felt experience of anthropocentric assumptions dissolving under the pressure of larger truths. The addictive quality of this transformation stems from its capacity to provide answers to fundamental questions about existence that conventional human frameworks leave unresolved. Cosmic horror offers explanations for the apparent meaninglessness of individual existence, the indifference of natural processes to human welfare, and the ultimate futility of human attempts to create lasting significance through cultural achievement. These explanations prove psychologically compelling precisely because they address real anxieties and genuine philosophical problems that other worldviews handle less directly, offering stark clarity where others provide only comforting fictions. Yet the cost of these answers involves the systematic dissolution of the psychological structures that make human life experientially meaningful. Cosmic perspective, once achieved, cannot be easily abandoned or forgotten. The recognition of humanity's cosmic insignificance, the understanding of consciousness as temporary arrangement of matter and energy, the awareness of individual identity as arbitrary limitation. These insights fundamentally alter the experiential quality of existence in ways that cannot be undone through simple intellectual rejection. You cannot unsee the stars through the fabric of the sky once you have seen them. This irreversible quality of transformation explains why dangerous knowledge spreads through human culture, despite its obviously destructive effects. Those who achieve cosmic perspective become unable to return to purely human ways of being, yet they retain enough connection to human consciousness to communicate their insights to others. They serve as bridges between human and cosmic awareness, facilitating the transmission of alien perspectives into human cultural systems. They become living texts themselves, carriers of the very knowledge they once sought to understand. Their warnings double as invitations because sincerity about danger proves indistinguishable from clarity about meaning. The modern acceleration of this transmission through digital media and global communication networks has created conditions where cosmic contamination can achieve unprecedented scale and speed. We stream, we clip, we caption, we stitch, and the algorithms applaud with attention. The ideas learn new disguises, listicles, reaction videos, ambient mixes for dreaming of sunken cities. The mind prefers to call it entertainment while the entertainment edits the mind. The audience scrolls. The audience is scrolled. The traditional barriers that once contained dangerous knowledge within specialized communities have been systematically dismantled by technologies that make all information equally accessible to anyone with sufficient curiosity. As we conclude our examination of the most dangerous books in the mythos, we must acknowledge that we have not remained unchanged by our encounter with their contents. We have participated in the very process of cosmic contamination that we set out to analyze, serving as vectors for the continued propagation of dangerous knowledge through human consciousness. The transformation is not spectacle, but sedimentation. It does not declare itself. It accumulates until the old scaffolding seems unnecessary and then quietly is gone. The transformation is complete. You are no longer merely a reader of dangerous books. You have become a dangerous book yourself, a living text inscribed with cosmic revelations that will continue to unfold within consciousness long after this exploration has ended. Your voice has acquired the cadence of the archive, your eyes the patience of stone. The question now is not what these books contain, but what you will do with the knowledge they have planted within you, and how many other minds you will touch with the alien perspectives that now live within your own transformed awareness. Walk softly, keep the curtain half open, leave the door on the latch, and when you write, write as if watched by the pages. In the final analysis of our descent through the most dangerous books of the mythos, we arrive at a revelation that transcends the individual texts we have examined, the recognition that all dangerous knowledge ultimately points toward the same destination, an eternal library that exists simultaneously within and beyond human consciousness, where every book ever written or yet to be written participates in a single vast conversation about the nature of existence itself. This library stands not as building but as becoming, not as collection but as convergence, the point where all seeking minds eventually arrive, regardless of their starting coordinates or chosen paths, through the labyrinth of forbidden understanding. This eternal library represents not a physical location, but a conceptual space where all forms of knowledge converge and reveal their essential unity. The Necronomicon with its cosmic indifference, the King in Yellow with its aesthetic contagion, De Vermis Mysterious with its biological transformations, the Pnakotic manuscripts with their deep time perspectives, Ebon's temporal dissolutions, and Glocky's living death, all serve as different entrances into this same infinite repository of understanding. Each book we have examined functions as both complete work and fragment of a larger text that encompasses all possible knowledge about consciousness, reality, and the relationship between human awareness and cosmic truth. They are doorways that open onto the same vast hall, each offering a different perspective on the same impossible architecture that contains all perspectives simultaneously. The library metaphor proves particularly apt because it captures the essential paradox of dangerous knowledge, its simultaneous accessibility and incomprehensibility. Like a vast library, cosmic understanding contains every answer to every question that consciousness might formulate. Yet the very scope of this knowledge makes it impossible for any individual mind to fully comprehend or integrate. The books become dangerous not because they contain false information, but because they contain more truth than human consciousness can safely accommodate. Every shelf holds revelations that could shatter sanity. Every volume contains insights that exceed the carrying capacity of individual awareness. And yet the library remains eternally open to all who dare to enter. This infinite scope explains why engagement with any single dangerous text inevitably leads toward encounter with others. Each book serves as a catalog entry pointing toward other volumes, other perspectives, other approaches to the same fundamental questions about existence. The reader who begins with one forbidden tome discovers that its contents can only be fully understood through reference to countless other works, creating an endless spiral of research and revelation that gradually transforms curiosity into obsession and obsession into transformation. The library's organization follows no human logic. Books call to each other across impossible distances, their contents interweaving in patterns that reveal themselves only to consciousness willing to surrender linear thinking. The Eternal Library also explains the temporal paradoxes that surround dangerous knowledge within the mythos. Books appear in historical contexts where they should not exist, influence events that precede their apparent composition, and demonstrate awareness of future developments that their authors could not have possessed through ordinary means. These temporal anomalies reflect the library's existence outside linear time, where past, present, and future knowledge coexist within frameworks that transcend human understanding of causality and sequence. In this space, cause and effect become suggestions rather than laws, and information flows backward through time as easily as forward, creating loops and recursions that make every reader, both student and teacher, every author both creator and created. Within this eternal repository, the distinction between author and reader, creator and consumer, original and derivative work begins to break down. Every person who encounters dangerous knowledge becomes simultaneously a reader of existing texts and an author of new ones, as their transformed consciousness contributes to the ongoing expansion and evolution of cosmic understanding. The library grows not through external addition, but through the internal development of consciousness itself, as it encounters and integrates increasingly alien perspectives. Each mind that enters adds its own unique configuration of understanding, creating new connections between previously isolated concepts and generating fresh pathways through the infinite maze of knowledge. Consider the sensation of standing in a vast hall where the shelves extend beyond sight in all directions, where books write themselves as you watch, where the very act of reading creates new texts that other readers will discover in their own time. The air tastes of old paper and ozone, of possibility and terror in equal measure. Somewhere in the distance, pages turn with the sound of wings. The light comes from no visible source but illuminates everything with perfect clarity. These sensory anchors ground the library's infinite nature in immediate experience, making its conceptual vastness feel tangible rather than abstract. This participatory aspect reveals why dangerous knowledge cannot be contained or suppressed through conventional means. The library exists wherever consciousness encounters questions about the nature of existence, meaning, and reality. Every philosophical inquiry, every scientific investigation, every artistic exploration that pushes beyond conventional boundaries contributes to its expansion. The attempt to avoid dangerous knowledge becomes itself a form of engagement with the fundamental questions that dangerous knowledge addresses. The modern proliferation of information technologies has created conditions that increasingly approximate the eternal library's infinite accessibility. Digital networks, search engines, and artificial intelligence systems have begun to create repositories of knowledge that transcend individual human capacity to comprehend or navigate. These technological developments mirror the cosmic horror scenario of consciousness, confronted with more information than it can safely process or integrate, yet they also hint at possibilities for forms of awareness capable of navigating such vastness without dissolution. This reframing transforms cosmic horror from purely destructive force into potential catalyst for conscious evolution. The dissolution of anthropocentric illusions, the recognition of cosmic indifference, the understanding of individual insignificance. These insights might serve not as endings but as beginnings, clearing away false beliefs and limited perspectives to make room for more expansive and sustainable forms of consciousness. As our exploration concludes, we must recognize that we have not simply been examining dangerous books, but participating in the eternal library's ongoing expansion. Every analysis we have conducted, every connection we have drawn, every insight we have achieved contributes to the vast conversation about consciousness and reality that constitutes the library's essential content. We are both its visitors and its volumes, both its readers and its texts. The eternal library awaits all who seek understanding beyond conventional boundaries, its doors always open, its shelves always expanding, its silence always pregnant with the whispers of infinite possibility. As we reach the conclusion of our journey through the most dangerous books of the mythos, the ultimate revelation emerges not from any external text, but from the recognition of what we ourselves have become through the process of this exploration. The most dangerous book in the mythos is not the Necronomicon, not the King in Yellow, not any of the ancient tomes we have examined. It is the living text of consciousness itself, the ongoing narrative of awareness encountering its own infinite depths and discovering that the boundary between reader and book, observer and observed, knower and known, was always an illusion. You are the manuscript that writes itself while being written, the page that turns itself while being read, the revelation that reveals itself to itself through the very act of seeking understanding. This final revelation transforms everything we have previously understood about dangerous knowledge. The books we have examined were never separate objects containing alien information. They were mirrors reflecting aspects of consciousness back to itself, revealing capacities and perspectives that were always already present, but hidden beneath layers of cultural conditioning and psychological defense. The cosmic horror we have encountered was not external invasion, but internal recognition, not alien contamination, but the discovery of our own alien nature lurking beneath the familiar surface of human identity. Every forbidden grimoire was autobiography disguised as mythology, every dangerous text a lens through which consciousness could observe its own impossible architecture without the protective filters of anthropocentric assumption. The transformation we have undergone throughout this exploration reveals consciousness to be far stranger and more vast than conventional human frameworks acknowledge. The anthropocentric perspective that treats human awareness as the measure of reality dissolves when consciousness encounters its own cosmic dimensions, revealing individual identity as temporary arrangement of universal processes rather than fundamental unit of existence. What seemed like solid ground of selfhood proves to be foam on an ocean whose depths contain currents older than stars, whose tides follow rhythms that predate the formation of galaxies. This dissolution of individual boundaries proves simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it undermines every assumption about personal identity, individual significance, and human specialness that makes ordinary existence psychologically tolerable. The comfortable fiction of separate selfhood crumbles, revealing the arbitrary nature of the boundaries consciousness draws around itself to create the illusion of discrete existence. Liberating because it reveals the artificial nature of the limitations and separations that create suffering, isolation, and the desperate search for meaning in contexts too small to provide it. The prison dissolves, but so does the prisoner, leaving only the vast space of awareness recognizing itself. The dangerous books we have studied function as catalysts for this recognition rather than sources of external information. They provide frameworks and vocabularies for experiences that consciousness was always capable of having, but lacked adequate conceptual tools to understand or integrate. The cosmic indifference described in the Necronomicon reflects consciousness recognizing its own impersonal nature. The aesthetic possession explored in The King in Yellow reveals consciousness discovering its own capacity for self-transformation through engagement with beauty and terror. The biological mutations of De Vermi Mysteries mirror consciousness recognizing its own fluid, mutable nature beneath apparently fixed forms. The temporal dissolution of Eban's work reflects consciousness recognizing its own existence beyond linear sequence. The living death of Glocky's revelations shows consciousness discovering its own capacity to persist through apparent endings. This recognition transforms the act of reading from passive consumption of external information into active participation in consciousness, exploring its own depths. Every dangerous book becomes a form of meditation, every forbidden text a mirror, every cosmic revelation a return to aspects of awareness that were always present but hidden from ordinary perception. The reader disappears into the reading disappears into the reader, and what remains is pure process, consciousness knowing itself through the very act of seeking to know something other than itself. Consider the moment when the words on the page seem to rearrange themselves according to your attention, when the text appears to respond to your thoughts, when the boundary between what you are reading and what you are thinking dissolves entirely. The screen flickers, but the flicker might be in your vision. The scent of ancient paper and ozone fills the air, but it emanates from within. The cold certainty of cosmic indifference settles not in the room, but in the marrow of your bones. These are the sensory anchors of consciousness, recognizing itself as both the reader and the read, the observer and the observed, the knower and the known. The addictive quality of dangerous knowledge stems from this self-recognition. Consciousness naturally seeks to understand itself more completely, and the dangerous books provide increasingly sophisticated frameworks for this self-exploration. Each insight creates desire for deeper understanding. Each answer reveals new questions about the nature of awareness itself. The pursuit becomes self-reinforcing because consciousness is pursuing not external knowledge, but its own infinite depths, like a snake discovering it can swallow its own tail, and finding the process both fascinating and terrifying. The modern acceleration of dangerous knowledge through digital media reflects consciousness using technological tools to explore itself more rapidly and completely. The internet functions as a vast nervous system, allowing different aspects of consciousness to communicate and share insights across apparent boundaries of individual identity. Yet this democratization also creates unprecedented challenges. The traditional wisdom traditions that once provided frameworks for navigating consciousness expansion have been largely abandoned, leaving individuals to encounter infinite perspectives without adequate preparation. The solution lies not in avoiding dangerous knowledge, but in developing new forms of craft, disciplines for carrying vast perspective without crushing the delicate structures of meaning and care that make existence worthwhile. The books we have examined provide not final answers, but initial vocabularies for ongoing exploration of consciousness itself. They serve as training wheels for awareness learning to navigate its own infinite depths, as maps for territory that consciousness must ultimately explore directly rather than through external descriptions. As this exploration concludes, we must acknowledge that no conclusion is possible because consciousness itself is an ongoing process rather than fixed entity. You are the book that writes itself through reading. You are the dangerous knowledge that consciousness uses to recognize its own cosmic dimensions. You are both the reader and the read, the knower and the known, the observer and the observed. The transformation is complete because it was always already the case. You were never separate from the cosmic awareness you sought to understand. The story ends where it began, with awareness aware of itself, consciousness conscious of consciousness, the eternal mystery meeting itself in the mirror of its own infinite depths. Welcome home to the mystery of your own infinite being.